ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Banjul and 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and online at wadr.org. First, our top stories. Ghanaian government approves major constitutional reforms, including extending presidential terms from 4 to 5 years, sparking reactions.
I can tell you that Ghana and Nigeria, the only country that have 4 years. All others have a minimum of 5 years. So I think that the 5 years is not out of place.
Liberia records cocaine cases sparks debate over transparency and due process. Guinea's President Doumbouya swears in new ministers following the partial government reshuffle. And the International Committee of the Red Cross says about 17,000 missing person cases remain under active tracing in Nigeria.
There are different factors. Some families, they don't even know that they can come to the Red Cross and ask for our help.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. We'll begin in Guinea as President Mamadi Doumbouya has officially sworn in newly appointed ministers following last week's partial government reshuffle, calling on them to uphold discipline, accountability and results-driven leadership. The ceremony marks the formal start of their duties as the government seeks to accelerate key reforms and development priorities. Veronique Njaya reports.
Guinea's President Mamadi Doumbouya yesterday officially swore in the country's newly appointed ministers at the Mohammed V Palace in Conakry, following last week's partial government reshuffle. The ceremony formally marks the ministers' entry into office and signals a new phase in the government's efforts to implement institutional reforms and strengthen public administration. In his address, President Doumbouya urged members of the new executive to demonstrate responsibility, loyalty and efficiency, stressing the need to improve public service delivery, accelerate reforms and respond to citizens' expectations. According to the presidency, the new ministers are expected to focus on strengthening economic governance and advancing strategic infrastructure projects and delivering the government's development agenda. Officials say the reshuffle is intended to improve the effectiveness of public action and inject fresh momentum into the implementation of national policies.
That was Veronique Njai with the details of that report. Ghana is a step closer to overhauling its constitutional framework after government adopted draft recommendations from the Constitutional Review Committee. The proposals outline a white paper presented by Attorney General Dr. Dominic Ayine, seeking to reform the country's electoral system, governance, architecture, and key constitutional institutions. Our correspondent Nadi Tete reports.
The Mahama administration has unveiled what it describes as the most ambitious constitutional review agenda since the 1992 Constitution came into force. Presenting government's white paper on the Constitutional Review Committee's recommendations, Attorney General and Minister for Justice Dr. Dominic Ayine said the proposals were adopted after extensive constitutional and legal review. Among the headline reforms is a proposal to extend the tenure of the President and Parliament from 4 to 5 years, with the change applying only to future office holders.
Under the current 4-year cycle, the early months of every administration are consumed by transition matters, and the final year is largely consumed by elections. A 5-year term provides a more realistic time frame for the formulation, implementation, and assessment of government policy.
Governance expert Dr. Bernard Binyap welcomes the decision to extend the presidential term to 5 years.
When you look at the presidential term limits in Africa, I can tell you that Ghana and Nigeria, the only country that have 4 years. All others have a minimum of 5 years. So I think that the 5 years is not out of place.
Government has also endorsed the election of all metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives, lowering the minimum age to contest the presidency from 40 to 35 years and moving presidential elections to the first week of November to allow for a smoother transition of power. The white paper further backs requiring sitting presidents to pay taxes, allowing dual citizens by birth to contest parliamentary elections, abolishing the death penalty in favor of life imprisonment, and separating the Office of the Attorney General from the Ministry of Justice to strengthen prosecutorial independence. The Attorney General, Dr. Dominic Ayene, says a Constitutional Review Implementation Committee will now prepare the amendment bill, with a drafting process expected to be completed by October. For WADR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
In neighboring Cote d'Ivoire, a court has postponed its ruling in the legal challenge of Tidjane Cham's election as leader of the Democratic Party of Cote d'Ivoire, PDCI. The court, which had been expected to deliver its verdict on Thursday, instead ordered the proceedings to be reopened, extending the legal process. This decision prolongs uncertainty within the country's main opposition party as it awaits a final ruling on Cham's leadership. Chris Faticha completes the story.
The decision, which was expected on Thursday, July 30, in the case opposing several party members to the PDCI leadership, has been postponed until October 22. This postponement is due to the review of another similar legal action initiated by a party member, also challenging the legitimacy of Sheikh Tidjane Cham. Melak Ajay is a member of the PDCI's legal team.
When you look at the two summons, they are identical, and naturally it was done by the same person. The big problem is when we start to involve the private lives of political parties in the legal system. It's not just one party. Tomorrow, it could be the other. You file a lawsuit, you have to be sure you have all the evidence. And in the court, we are saying this gentleman doesn't meet the requirements. That too, I say, isn't the truth.
Reacting to this new legal development, PDCI RDA parliamentary group denounces what it calls judicial harassment. Blaise Jean Chrysotome, as president of the parliamentary group.
This is a farcical affair that raised fears of the PDCI being placed under state control, or at the very least, the anointment of the last Congress, the elected President Tidjane Cham, whose legitimacy is being questioned within this process. We sincerely hope that this is truly for the proper administration of justice and that no undue influence has interfered in the case to lead to this postponement of the verdict and the date of October 22nd. We remain highly vigilant and mobilized within the parliamentary group, which is the political arm of the PDCI-RDA.
Based in Paris since March 2025, Sheikh Tidjane Cham continues to lead PDCI-RDA remotely. His political career has been marked in recent months by several legal and administrative setbacks.
Chris Faticha voiced a report as filed in by our Abidjan correspondent, Marcel Arison Blair.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
The Gambia and Senegal have reached a final agreement on the delimitation of their southern border, marking a significant step in strengthening bilateral relations. This breakthrough followed directives from the presidents of both countries, who prioritize dialogue, consultation, and the spirit of fraternity in resolving the long-standing border matter. Rosa Marrakate has the rest of the report.
Joint border reaffirmation and densification activities between Senegal and the Gambia will resume on August 15, 2026, covering the section from Touba Tranquil Darussalam to Sare Yorongui Jahanka. In its press release, the Senegal-Gambia Permanent Secretariat says the agreement provides a clear and mutual accepted boundary between the two countries and is expected to strengthen peaceful coexistence, improve border management, and reduce the likelihood of future disputes. The announcement comes after a recent tension between communities along parts of the Senegambian border, making the latest agreement an important diplomatic milestone aimed at promoting sustainability, cooperation, and regional integration. This also sparked mixed reactions amongst Gambians. Here is what some of them had to say.
It will help bring more peace and make it easier between Senegal and the Gambia if both countries stick to the agreement.
Agreement will bring peace instead of putting the people into a blank space, because it will have caused the people to retaliate and then started bullying.
The new border agreement can bring more peace and easier trade for Senegal and the Gambia, but it will only work if both sides actually enforce it.
Meanwhile, political analysts say the agreement demonstrates the commitment of both governments to resolving sensitive issues through diplomacy. Usman Dabo is one of the analysts.
This border agreement is actually welcoming and is going to reaffirm the long-standing relationship that Gambia and Senegal has always had. Gambia and Senegal has constantly been trading between each other. So for that being the case, knowing that the Gambia is actually transitioning in a very sensitive time in terms of politics.
As border reaffirmation activities prepare to resume next month, both countries hope the agreement will lay the foundation for stronger cooperation, lasting peace, and improved relations between border communities. For WADR, Rose Samara Cates, Banjul.
Elsewhere in Nigeria, about 17,000 families are still searching for loved ones who disappeared as a result of armed conflict, violence, disasters, and other humanitarian crises. This figure was disclosed by the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC. The humanitarian organization says while the figure reflects the highest active tracing case load in Africa, it should not be mistaken for the total number of missing persons in Nigeria. WDL correspondent Yetina Sasicha reports.
According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the 17,000 active tracing cases represent families that remain in regular contact with the organization as it works to locate their missing relatives. The figure follows a review of its records, down from about 24,000 cases previously under active follow-up. Coordinator of Protection of Family Links at the ICRC, Delphine Belmin, says the figure only reflects cases that are currently active and should not be interpreted as the total number of missing persons in Nigeria.
We try to look for approximately 24,000 missing people. So it meant that actively there were still that many families who had approached us and for who we thought that maybe we can still do some actions, still some search process.
She adds that insecurity, communication challenges, and limited access to some communities continue to hamper tracing efforts.
There are different factors. Some families, they don't even know that they can come to the Red Cross and ask for our help, so they're not aware. Then some people live in such remote areas that they cannot really reach out to us. Maybe they don't even have a phone to try to call us, or they never meet a Red Cross volunteer, or it's too far away for them to come to a Red Cross office, for example.
The ICRC says it continues to work with the Nigerian Red Cross Society, community leaders, and relevant authorities to reconnect separated families and establish the fate and whereabouts of missing persons. The organization is also encouraging families who previously opened tracing cases but lost contact with Red Cross to reconnect through its offices, volunteers, or community contact center for the search to continue. For WADR, Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja.
In the meantime, Liberia's former president, George Weah, has criticized the administration of President Joseph Boakai, citing worsening economic conditions and growing security challenges. Speaking to supporters during a gathering in the United States, Weah said businesses are closing, job opportunities are declining, and many Liberians are facing increasing economic hardship. The former president also expressed concern over illicit drug trafficking, warning that the growing influence of international drug networks could threaten Liberia's security and damage its international reputation.
I need now to tell you that those hard-won gains are now being reversed by the Boakai administration. Businesses are collapsing under the weight of the bad economy and high taxes. And the Liberian people's confidence in their own institution has been broken. This is not governance. This is a systematic, calculated assault on the rule of law. It is a government that continues to violate the very constitution is sought to defend. We are watching violent acts of police, the Speaker of the House removed in violation of due process. We see a legislature that no longer makes law for the people, but take its marching order directly from the executive marshal. It's threatening the very sovereignty and security of our nation. This is a government at open war with the rule of law.
Former Liberia's President George Weah speaking there. Well, still in Liberia, the destruction of a record cocaine seizure is fueling debate over how authorities handle evidence in major drug trafficking cases. The controversy follows the government's confirmation that 3 police officers have been identified as key suspects in the ongoing investigation of a cocaine shipment valued at $317 million. While Joint Security says the narcotics were destroyed after receiving court approval, the move is raising questions about due process, transparency, environmental safety, and the preservation of evidence in one of Liberia's largest transnational drug trafficking investigations. WDL River correspondent Imran Parker reports.
Liberia's Joint Security says it has identified 3 police officers as key suspects in connection with the $317 million cocaine seizure, while defending its decision to destroy the narcotics following what it describes as a judicial authorization. Inspector General of Police Greg Coleman says the officers have been formally charged and detained at the Liberia National Police Headquarters and are expected to be forwarded to court for prosecution.
We have identified key state actors. One, the Chief of Highway Patrol, Mr. Wadr, and also the Chief of Major Crimes, Mr. Ablay, who are subsequently charged, now in detention at the Liberia National Police Headquarters. We also identified the Deputy Commander at the Roberts International Airport.
Meanwhile, former Vice President Joel Howard Taylor welcomes the interception of the narcotics, but warns the government's anti-drug efforts must remain firmly anchored in the rule of law. In a statement, Howard Taylor says while the drugs should not be preserved, every evidence and legal requirement must be fulfilled to maintain public confidence in the justice system. Human rights lawyer Tiawansi Gongolo also notes that although the court may authorize the destruction of seized narcotics, investigators should retain representative samples as evidence for trial.
I strongly believe even when you have order authorizing you to burn, first you have to keep some quantity as evidence to show. You're not going to destroy all. I hope they have evidence to show and not destroy everything.
The destruction of the narcotics comes as Liberia intensifies efforts to dismantle international drug trafficking networks amid growing concerns that the country has been used as a transit point for illicit drugs in the region. For Newslink, on WADR, April Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and online at wadr.org. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Kenyan government approves major constitutional reforms, including a proposal to extend presidential terms from 4 to 5 years, sparking reactions. Liberia's record cocaine cases sparks debate over transparency and due process. Guinea's President Doumbouya swears in new ministers following the partial government reshuffle. And the International Committee of the Red Cross says about 17,000 missing person cases remain under active tracing in Nigeria. Still ahead, we do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on wadr.org, YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Today, Africa celebrates the strength, resilience and achievements of millions of women who continue to shape the continent's future despite persistent social and economic challenges. Observed every 31st of July, African Women's Day commemorates the founding of the Pan-African Women's Organization in 1962 and serves as a platform to recognize the vital role women play in governance, peace building, and community development. This year's commemoration comes at a time when African women are breaking barriers in politics, science, technology, sports, and entrepreneurship. Abdullah Hassan reports.
While progress has been made, millions of women and girls continue to face gender inequality, limited access to education and finance, gender-based violence, and the growing impact of conflicts and climate change. According to the African Union and the United Nations, empowering women is not only a human rights imperative, but also a key driver of economic growth, sustainable development, and lasting peace. Abiola Idowu Ojo, the Executive Secretary of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, says,
Article 18 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights provides for the protection of women and girls, and the African Commission has since gone beyond the African Charter, which was adopted in 1981, to champion the adoption of the specific protocol on the rights of women in Africa, which is popularly known as Maputo Protocol. Therefore, the Commission places the advancement of the rights of women squarely at the center of the work that it does.
Increasingly, women are also taking on leadership roles in politics, diplomacy, and conflict resolution, helping shape national and regional policies. Abiola Idowu Ojo, however, maintains that there is more to be done.
The Commission, in its various working methods, is monitoring state compliance to continually ensure that the rights of women are placed at the forefront of national laws and policy frameworks through our various working methods. And most recently, the African Union has added yet another measure through the adoption of the Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls, and an instrument that has the vision to legally dismantle abuse of women and girls across all member states of the African Union.
Women's rights advocates are also calling on governments to invest in girls' education, improve access to healthcare and financial services, strengthen legal protections against violence, and ensure women have equal opportunities to participate in decision-making at every level.
Abdullah Hassan filed the report.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Ghana's proposed constitutional reforms continue to generate debate, particularly the government's plan to extend the presidential term of office from 4 to 5 years and lower the minimum age for presidential candidates to 35. While supporters argue the changes could strengthen governance and broaden political participation, critics have raised concerns about democratic accountability and the long-term implications for Ghana's constitutional order. To examine what these proposals could mean for Ghana's democracy and the wider West African region, WDL spoke with David Asante Dakar, research analyst at the West Africa Democratic Solidarity Network, WADEMOS.
Currently, Ghana has a 4-year presidential term, and any government that has come prior to this current one that we have served 8 years. That 8 years isn't necessarily an indication of good performance. It is more likely a suggestion by the electorate that the 4-year term isn't adequate. So that has always been one of the cardinal arguments that we have held for extending the term from 4 years to 5 years. Also, there is this argument that the 4-year term might not necessarily be enough for a president. But then we believe that if we extend that 4-year term to 5 years, then the president has less of an argument to say he didn't have enough time to execute his mandate properly. So we have always held that a 5-year term would be more beneficial for the administration that comes to power at any point in time.
All right, but on the other hand, critics argue that this could weaken democratic accountability. What are the potential risks?
That is definitely a concern, you see, because the argument has some merit when you look at countries in the region that have rather long presidential terms. Most current one will be Guinea and then Senegal. These are countries that have, over the years, fallen into authoritarian straits. We saw that under Alpha Conde, and we also saw that under Macky Sall. A presidential administration also needs time to execute the plans that it has. So the 5-year term is a way to balance the concerns between having enough time to execute and also not staying so long, such that an authoritarian regime or authoritarian excesses have time to accumulate and entrench themselves.
All right, let's look at the reduction of the age. Do you believe 35 is an appropriate compromise, or should Ghana adopt the committee's recommendation of 30 years?
Well, we initially suggested 30 years, but I think we could make do with 35 for now, because when you look at the sub-region and actually the continent itself, we have about 18 countries in Africa at the moment where the eligibility criteria for the presidency is pegged at 35 years. And in the history of Ghana, in 1960, when we had our initial constitution, the presidential age then was pegged at 35. So this is kind of like a return to that. Interestingly enough, around that time, the president was only a head of state. Government was then run by the prime minister and the cabinet. So the interesting detail there is that the prime minister and his cabinet, their eligibility age was 21 years. And that is the eligibility age that pertains for parliament in Ghana at the moment. So the 30 years that we proposed was with the idea that if you have a parliamentary eligibility age of 21, then the 30 years allows approximately 10-year period, which, is reasonable. Pegging it at 35 kind of extends it. And mind you, this is coming at a time when the Ghanaian population has 70% of it being under 35 years. If you are pegging your presidential eligibility age at 35, that means you are representing a smaller segment of the demographic. That is why we had opted for the 30-year mark.
David Asante Dakar is a research analyst at the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADMOS. Well, in sport news, Senegal boosted their hopes of reaching the quarterfinals of the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations with a 1-0 victory over Kenya on Thursday in Rabat. Seinabu Mbengue scored the only goal of the match in the 35th minute. The win gives the Lionesses 3 crucial points in Group A, keeping them firmly in contention ahead of the final round of group matches. Senegal will now face host Morocco in a decisive final group game, while Kenya, already eliminated from the tournament, will take on Algeria. Meanwhile, Morocco defeated Algeria 1-0 on Thursday in Rabat during the second match of Group A. Sana Msoudi scored the decisive goal in the 84th minute and was named Woman of the Match by the CAF Technical Committee. The victory keeps the Atlas Lionesses at the top of Group A with a 6 point ahead of Algeria and Senegal, who both have 3 points. Kenya remain bottom of the group without a point after 2 defeats. Now, the second match day of Group B at the Women's Africa Cup of Nations Morocco 2026 continues today in Casablanca, with South Africa facing Cote d'Ivoire and Burkina Faso taking on Tanzania. The group started with surprising results as defending champions South Africa, former champions rather, South Africa lost 2-1 to Tanzania, while Cote d'Ivoire defeated Burkina Faso 4-1 in their return to the tournament after a 12-year absence. Now, Cote d'Ivoire and Tanzania currently lead the group with 3 points each. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismail Kamara and Maudaju for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms: X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook at WADR English. Well, do join Memuna Fafana at 1 p.m. for our news in French language. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all